Gentlemen, welcome back to the Surplus Bunker. Today we're talking all about AKs. Are they still relevant, or have they become kind of niche in 2025? Now, this video is partly a response to Military Arms Channel, who put out a video just the other day talking about this very thing. Are we still seeing a lot of interest around AKs? I'd submit, and there are a number of factors at play, from increasing prices, import bans, the lack of ammunition. They're kind of niche now, which is really sad to say. And to give you a little context, especially those of you Zoomers out there, these were the go-to rifles for those of us who were balling on a budget in our youth. You could pick up a Sega, a real Russian-produced rifle, for $275 to $250, and you could get Wasser 10s for $300 to $375. They were worth what they were worth for a reason, right? They weren't great. They were conscript-grade, poverty-tier rifles that generally reliably cycled 7.62x39. I had a lot of problems with my Wasser 10 back in the day. That's how I wound up with this Sega. And I have put maybe only a few hundred rounds through this rifle over the course of the entire time that I've had it, because I was on that tail end of the golden age of the AK. ARs were beginning to become much more popular. The AWB had expired, and we were beginning to see a lot of new competition in the AR space. It wasn't flooded like it is now. Anderson Manufacturing was just coming onto the scene. Wyndham Weaponry was still one of the dominant AR manufacturers. Not in my HOA. And the AKs were still the cheap option, but I started to go the AR route. Now, that being said, I did direct a lot of peers who were balling on a budget into AKs, especially the Hungarian AMD 65s. They were available for the $400 range. There were just so many good options at that time, and to see the quick flip of the switch to the AR becoming the dominant rifle for even young people has been kind of crazy, but cool at the same time, because I do feel it is a much better rifle and a much better value. We'll get into why as we continue to crank along through this video. Because I'd submit at this point, it really doesn't make very much sense to buy or invest in an AK-47, because the options now are not only extremely limited, but they're really expensive for what you're getting. You're getting a conscript-grade rifle that shoots 3 to 4 MOA for $1,000 in a caliber that, frankly, you can't get anymore unless you shop in bulk online. You're looking at 50 cents a round now for 7.62x39, and I don't even know what 5.45 is priced out. Good luck even finding it. But for me, that was always a weak link for me as to why I never invested a ton into the AK market. Because the AKs were so cheap when I started jumping into them, it really wasn't something that worried me too much. And there were still plenty of surplus Norinco ammo even floating around, even though that had been banned from import for quite some time. But fast forward only a few years, and I'd submit now that the only time I ever see an AK-47 at the local gun club is when I bring an AK-47 to the local gun club. So they're definitely more niche. I think of them kind of like a boomer rifle to some degree, because they kind of are, right? Us millennials now we're up there. We're not spring chickens anymore. And seeing this market shift towards ARs over AKs has been really interesting to watch, as the prices on these just kept climbing higher and higher and higher, and the ARs just went lower and lower and lower and lower. Nobody's really buying these anymore. Like, pay attention next time you go to your local gun shop. You know, as your fiduciary in this video as well, I would say think about, if you ever decide you no longer want to own that AK, is there a market for that rifle, right? Much like the military surplus stuff, when it was $100 and you could cure male loneliness by buying an $80 rifle and then spending $80 on a spam can and shooting trash with the boys in the woods. You can't do that anymore, right? Those days are behind us, which I think is one of the reasons why we're all so miserable now, right? But really going back to these, they're just niche, right? Like, if you're going to spend the money, I would recommend going the Galil route, because the quality control is much, much higher. The accuracy you're going to achieve is at a higher level, and you can get them in 5.56, and they will cycle 5.56 reliably, which is not something you're going to get in one of these, right? Unless it's a Sega maybe or something. But the American-produced AKs, there's plenty of feedback here. You can do a little bit of your own research into this, and I would encourage you to do so. I've spent hours and hours poking into 5.56 AKs before I decided on a Galil. None of them work reliably, and I wanted the true aesthetic of an AK. As a military surplus firearm collector, I wasn't exactly heartbroken about going into a Galil for its connections to the movie Heat, obviously, but I did want a AK-74 style rifle that fired 5.56, and sadly, even the Polish ones, they don't seem to be super great either. Then there's all these weird problems with the mags, and it's just, again, it gets into that niche category where you're spending all this money on accessories and stuff that if you ever have to get your money back out of it, you're probably not going to be able to do that easily. I've got a PTR in 7.62x39 that I'd considered parting with, and no, YouTube censor, I'm not selling anything here. I'm just speaking in general terms. But I wanted to get out of it because I bought that rifle under a very specific context. And while it's a very nice shooter and it's the most accurate 7.62x39 rifle on the market, it doesn't really make much sense for me to keep with the current objectives I have with my firearms collection. But there's no interest around it, unfortunately. So that's one of those things you have to be really careful with when you start getting into this stuff, is how niche is it, right? And I'm going to get into the more niche firearms in another video about PCCs and PDWs in a little bit as well, and some issues you may have there. Again, acting as a fiduciary here for you. But yeah, I don't really see where these make sense unless you really have to have one for the second kind of cool. If you've got, your AR-15 all squared away, right? You've got it set up with a suppressor, which I would submit at this point is pretty much a non-negotiable, right? You've got your reared and muzzle device on there. You've got your LPVO and your red dot and all your other Gucci accessories. And you're doing it smartly, and you're not drowning in debt doing it, maybe then consider getting an AK for the second kind of cool. And I think the retro style of AK is probably going to be the dominant style moving forward. You'll likely have some cloners who want to build stuff based off the current conflict overseas, but I think the classic aesthetic like this, right, even with the wood, is probably going to be more of what people are going to be interested in, especially guys who served in the GWAT era. They maybe want to clone an Iraqi AK. I'd love to see some more reproductions like that, and I think that we will see an emergence of those type of builds and rifles in the coming years, but they will be very niche and likely very expensive. Anyway, guys, what do you think about all this? Do you think we will see a resurgence in interest in the AK? I'm not really sure we will, outside of that, as I said, that like really niche collector cloner community. We're in the age of the AR, guys, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Take care. Thanks for watching.